we are going to do an autopsy of sorts on our takes from this fantasy football season. We'll highlight our biggest hits and misses and see if there's anything we can learn from them. As of course, our goal is to get better every year. In terms of how we identified these biggest hits and misses, we pulled these names mostly from episode 899, which was our round by round favorite picks show. Also from my perfect draft article that I wrote in the draft kit, Silva's shy away list, and other content from the draft kit in late August. And let's start with a big hit from Silva in the round by round favorite pick pod. Came to Silva in round 2. He said his favorite pick in round 2 was Jonathan Taylor. Now, I want to be clear, we did that show after Daniel Jones was named the starter back on August 19th. Before that, I was kind of lukewarm, kind of shaky on JT. After Daniel Jones was actually named the starter, that's when it started to become very clear that JT had a big chance. So any takeaways for you, Evan, from the big hit on Jonathan Taylor in 2025?
I would say that the only thing that I wish that I would have done differently is had Jonathan Taylor even higher, because he deserved to be, a top first half of the first round pick. But I mean, we're kind of onto this. The Colts offensive line wound up being better than I think most people anticipated, with Anthony Richardson kind of out of the mix. Jonathan Taylor had a chance to be much better in the receiving game, which was a huge part of Jonathan Taylor's success over the course of the season. He did fall off at the end. You saw the impact of losing Daniel Jones. Even when Daniel Jones was trying to play through the broken leg, things started to go haywire. But they were super smart with the decisions that they made under Shane Steichen, playing a lot from under center. That really helped Jonathan Taylor, throwing the ball to the running back. Jonathan Taylor almost never came off the field. He stayed healthy. Finally, he got that positive injury regression, wound up being easily the best second-round pick in all of fantasy.
Yeah, and I think it's a reminder of like the kind of running backs that you can take high. The kind of running backs that you can take in round 1 and round 2 are these guys that have the ability to carry huge workloads and make plays on their own. And that defines Jonathan Taylor, right? Like, even if the system isn't that great, whatever, Jonathan Taylor can break an 80-yard run at any time. So there were a lot of outs to Daniel Jones being reasonable. That hit, Daniel Jones was actually very good. That hit. And then there were also outs to JT just being an awesome NFL running back. So yeah, from the best ball stuff, it hurt me because obviously I was drafting a lot before August 19th when Daniel Jones was named the starter. So I didn't end up with enough JT, but I was glad that after that, I got on it. One part of this that I did want to mention, I want to just note that the call of the strategy of 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds, like ensuring you got one of that Achane, JT, Jacobs, Chase Brown, Bucky. In hindsight, that was right too. And one takeaway for me from that is it goes back to suspecting that league trends would be sticky. And by league trends, I mean more offenses skewing more run heavy lately, more defenses playing too high safety lately, more offenses countering that by throwing less, throwing to running back and tight end more. And that's kind of a theme that I think is an important takeaway that we'll continue to talk about this offseason. All right. JT was a great hit. Number 2 on our list here was a big miss, and that is Brian Thomas Jr. I know we talked about this a little bit on the Man vs. Machine recap. I've been thinking a lot about the Brian Thomas Jr. thing. I think one takeaway for me, at least, Evan, is the smaller sample we have on a guy, the wider range of outcomes there is. In other words, we only had 17 games on BTJ. We never saw him compete for targets with anyone good. There was also more variance when a new coaching regime came in. That does not mean that these kind of year 2 profiles can't hit at the wide receiver position. In fact, they hit a lot. That kind of wide receiver 2 bet has been a very good bet historically. But I think just understanding the opportunity cost that the 1-2 turn is massive, and it is not a tight range of outcomes on BTJ. From like a macro perspective, that's the only thing I can say. But it's really hard to figure out what happened with BTJ this year. Evan, any thoughts on the miss on BTJ?
Yeah, it's such a tough one because I love BTJ so much. I thought that, it's embarrassing to say in hindsight, but I mean, I believed it at the time is that Brian Thomas could become one of the best, or maybe even considered the best receiver in the league after his rookie season, going into his second season. I mean, he's like I feel like he's one of the worst starting wide receivers in the league right now. I think you can confidently say that, actually, sadly. Um, he was extremely productive. I mean, he was a dominant player in the SEC. He led the nation in touchdown catches. His combine measurables were off the charts. He was a first round pick in the NFL draft. He, you know, um, he went into an offense that the previous year under Liam Cohen had produced career bests in yards per route run from both Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. So it seemed like a really wide receiver friendly system that he was going into. Um, he checked almost every box. And then when push came to shove, like he just wasn't up to the task to be a true number one receiver. They had to make a change. They brought in Jacoby Myers. That's when their offense took off. They upped the usage of Parker Washington, who was playing similar, if not more, in terms of playing time down the stretch of the season in comparison to Brian Thomas. There were rumors surrounding Brian Thomas at the trade deadline. I think if they get a second round pick for Brian Thomas, I think they would entertain it this offseason. I think that my biggest takeaway on this massive miss for me was maybe just not considering that the change in the offensive system could backfire like it did. But again, I don't think I'm ever going to get the process right in this when a dude checks as many boxes as Brian Thomas did. I think that I'm going to keep betting on that process, and I think just a certain percentage of the time it's just not going to work out like it did not with Brian Thomas.
Well, Brian Thomas Jr. and we don't have Ladd McConkey as a hit or a miss because I think Evan and I were both taking the running backs over Ladd McConkey there in round 2 where he was going. So I would not call that a hit or a miss. I just want to say though that kind of profile, Ladd McConkey's college to year 1 NFL profile, Brian Thomas's college to year 1 profile, those are historically awesome bets in year 2, and it just didn't work out. Now I keep going back to like in today's NFL, you cannot just play X and expect to be a really productive NFL wide receiver. Only like the best of the best can do that. Once they start using Parker Washington, Jacoby Myers, moving those guys all over the field inside more, I think that hurt Brian Thomas. And it's like, but the coaching staff did not go out of their way to put Brian Thomas in a position to win. And that shocked me because if I was taking that job and I was Liam Cohen, I'd be like, oh my God, one of the reasons I'm taking this job is because Brian Thomas is there.
If you remember the way that he was talking about Brian Thomas before the season, it sure sounded like that's one of the reasons that he took the job. I think that they did try to give him that opportunity to be the number one receiver early in the season. He failed, and they adjusted, and then their offense took off.
Yep. All right. Let's go to number 3, which is a hit from my perfect draft article in round 2. Devon Achane, just really easy one here. I don't think there's a lot to say. Like, if you think a running back can catch 100 passes in a season, which clearly Devon Achane could, and you think he can also run for 10 touchdowns, he's probably a great pick, right? And then if you add in that Devon Achane, unlike a running back we're going to talk about in a minute, Devon Achane can just go for 80-yard touchdown at any time, one of the most explosive running backs in the league. Well, clearly in the second round, there's a lot of systemic risk around Miami. If you remember back in August, everyone was like, oh my God, Miami's going to be terrible. They're going to win 2 games. The wheels are off Tua. That was a lot of noise that pushed Devon Achane into round 2. And I think the lesson, if there is one here, is like Achane's profile, similar to Christian McCaffrey or Gibbs or a lot of these other guys, is so unique that like all that stuff is noise. He is such an elite fantasy player. So yeah, really good hit, I think, for anyone that got on Achane there in round 2. Evan, anything to add on Achane's season?
Well, the key with Devon Achane was to not chicken out on the late camp calf injury.
Yeah.
Which I did. I mean, I moved him down to the back end of the second round where you were probably not going to get Devon Achane. You had to hold strong. What do they say with the diamond hands? Yeah, you had to have diamond hands with Devon Achane this year. And goodness gracious, if you did. And also you had to have diamond hands through our shared concerns about the environmental issues in Miami, which is why we were off Tyreek Hill. Now I understand Tyreek Hill got injured, but I mean, he wasn't looking very good before that either. But you had to have true diamond hands with Devon Achane. And if you did, goodness gracious, did that pay off? I mean, this guy threw 3 seasons, and he's a guy with a soft tissue injury who relies on speed. That terrifies me. He's 188 pounds, but he's a freaking unicorn. He averaged 5.7 yards per carry to lead the NFL this year. As a rookie, he averaged 7.8 yards per carry. That's like a big old school Big 12 sort of average, and this guy has the ability to catch, as you mentioned, a million passes. So he's a true unicorn. I'm really interested to see what happens in Miami post Mike McDaniel. I'd love to see for the Chargers to trade for Devon Achane. I don't think that's going to happen, but yeah, this was a diamond hands victory, I think.
For sure. All right, let's go to number 4 on the list here. It is Christian McCaffrey. Now, this was, I think, kind of a miss for both of us. We talked about it plenty on man versus machine. I was taking Bijan, Barkley, and Gibbs over CMC at running back. I was also taking Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb over Christian McCaffrey at wide receiver. And so I was not taking McCaffrey until 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th overall, sometimes 7th. And that kind of had me underweight on McCaffrey during the drafting process. I also, remember distinctly saying, I think I said this multiple times on the show. It's like, man, there's so much opportunity cost in round 1. If you are uncomfortable with McCaffrey's injury history, just take someone else. And that was kind of a cowardly thing to say, I think. I get I don't know. For some people out there, they don't want to take on the injury risk. And even though Christian McCaffrey, from a results perspective, did stay healthy and had all these insane amount of touches, there's still going to be people out there that say, oh, he just got lucky, and maybe people did get lucky. And so the people that were scared about injury on McCaffrey, I guess I don't blame them, even though I think it was kind of cowardly, and I was one of them. So yeah, Evan, I know we've talked about McCaffrey a ton already on the man versus machine stuff. Any final thoughts on the McCaffrey season?
Well, he was a player who's, trending toward 30. He had played in 4 games the previous season. And he's got a ton of wear on his tires, even dating back to college. They used him like crazy back at Stanford. If you would have just given me 2 data points, end of season data points before the season, both significant ones, his yards per carry, which was 3.9, and the fact that he showed up as questionable with a calf injury entering week 1. If you just would have given me those 2 data points before the season, I mean, what do you think he would have been? A 5th round pick in fantasy drafts? But he wound up being, obviously paying off more. I think he was the number 1 player in fantasy.
Yep.
He didn't have a 20-plus yard run until week 16, I believe. But his ability to stay healthy amid so many guys around him falling apart, or at least missing significant chunks of time. George Kittle, Juwan Jennings was hurt all the time. Pearsall had 5 productive games. Purdy missed time so that Mac Jones started. Trent Williams was banged up. He was the engine of the offense. It was just a remarkable season. And it was a testimony to the point that Leone made in the original Man versus Machine show, that these Hall of Fame players, they do have a tendency to overcome the odds.
Yeah.
And Christian McCaffrey one day will be wearing a gold jacket.
Yeah. The point is the selection bias stuff. If you get to the NFL at age 30 as a starting running back, you're likely incredibly good, and incredibly good at staying healthy also. So, yeah, I think for me, the McCaffrey stuff is, I do not think that people are good at predicting injuries. I think it is mostly random. Everybody's a favorite to get hurt. I think in my head, it was more the opportunity cost in round 1 is so massive. Even if McCaffrey did stay healthy, I didn't think there was a big difference between him, Bijan, Saquon, Gibbs, Chase, Lamb anyways. So I was like, all right, I'll just take those guys ahead. And it turned out that there was a difference. I mean, McCaffrey was just straight up better than almost all of those guys. All right. We are looking back at 2025 today, but I regret to inform you that 2026 best ball tournaments are officially live on Underdog, Drafters, and coming soon on DraftKings. In true Virgin fashion, our initial set of rankings for 2026 best ball are indeed live for NFL best ball product subscribers. For more details on that, head to the NFL subscribe page and click on best ball. That is the best ball product at establishtherun.com. All right, let's go to number 5, Evan, which is one of the more controversial running backs of the season, Chase Brown. I think it's hard to call it really a hit or a miss because there was just that long stretch there where he was so bad, but he ended up being a league winner and guy you needed. I mean, from a results perspective, Chase Brown was one of the most valuable running backs in fantasy after Jake Browning was benched. But from a process perspective, Chase Brown ran very hot on touchdowns. He was losing a lot of base work to Samaje Perine, way more than I thought that he would. He was losing a ton of pass down work to Perine also. So I don't think Chase Brown was like the greatest pick here. He needs offensive environment to carry him to some degree, whereas Achane or JT can go break an 80-yard run or catch 8 checkdowns. That's not really Chase Brown. But from a results perspective, he smashed despite Perine playing so much. So it's hard for me to call this like a hit or a miss. Evan, I just, in hindsight, I want to be careful about running backs who are so reliant on offensive environment. Like when Browning was in there, I couldn't even start Chase Brown, and that felt really, really bad. So, Evan, any thoughts on Chase Brown's season?
Well, when Browning was in there, I mean, it was so bad, like you couldn't really start anybody, right? So I don't think I don't. My takeaway from this season is that Chase Brown is like good. I think my takeaway from the first couple seasons of his career is that he's good, and I mean, certainly he benefits when Joe Burrow is in there, even Joe Flacco. I mean, he also had Joe Flacco in there. I mean, are we going to, you know what I mean? Like he was producing with Joe Flacco. And I know Joe Flacco made the Pro Bowl, okay? But, I mean, I don't think that he's that dependent on offensive environment. I just think that Jake Browning is the sinker of all ships.
Yeah.
I mean, Chase Brown had 69 receptions.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think he's good. I actually think that what happened in the end, especially his ability to produce with Joe Flacco, showed that the take that Chase Brown is just not good and totally environmentally dependent, that is actually not true.
Right. But we're comparing him to guys who are like where he's going to go around like Achane and, all these like elite,
well, he produced like those guys when Jake Browning wasn't in there.
Yeah.
He produced like those guys when Joe Flacco was in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I do think he ran a little hot on like the fact that they were willing to play Perine so much like irked me. You know what I mean? Because Samaje Perine sucks, man. Like, let's be honest. And so like they played him a lot when Perine was healthy. And that like irked me. The coaches didn't even think that Chase Brown should be in there for every snap like JT was, like Achane was to some degree. So, but yeah, I hear you for sure. He was incredibly productive and he catches the ball really well, and he plays well around the goal line. I mean, it's all good stuff for sure.
It just got so bad there early in the season with Browning in there for everybody really, that it was just really hard. That hurt because we came out the gates. We were hot on Chase Brown all off season. We're feeling good about it. We had him on all our best ball teams, and it's just like boom, straight to the ground. And then it takes about 5 weeks. We get Flacco in there, and then Chase Brown the rest of the way produced exactly as we anticipated. But it hurt so bad. Like we felt that. We can still feel it to this day, how bad that felt. I mean, it was almost like you couldn't use them there for like 3 or 4 weeks. And I mean, I'm sure that in some shallower leagues, he got dropped.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to number 6 on the list. Trey McBride from the Perfect Draft article. Like, it wasn't that I was in love with McBride. It was just I was uncomfortable with a lot of round 3 picks. I don't know if you remember this, Evan, but we talked a lot about how that round 3 was likely filled with a lot of landmines. I felt like wide receiver and running back were relatively weak in this range. So I was taking a lot of McBride and quarterback here. Now, McBride ended up just going berserk. We never could have predicted that Kyler would get benched. Brissett would be dropping back 50 times a game. But the point remains from the takeaway here. If you hit at tight end, you have a massive advantage over the field. It's just really hard to hit at tight end. But man, like when you do, I mean, McBride was, even though he didn't score as many points as McCaffrey or JT or whatever, like it is so much more valuable to have that at tight end. So I'm always trying to hit on elite tight end. It's just very, very risky, but I thought the risk was mitigated in round 3 this year because round 3 felt really weak to me. So that's why I felt really good about McBride. Process, hindsight. Evan, any thoughts on McBride's season?
Yeah, and McBride, shout out to Trey McBride. I mean, Mackey Award winner. He helped us win money in that FFPC main event team that we won on. Um, it also really amplified his success that Brock Bowers and George Kittle got hurt.
Yeah.
So Trey McBride was a massive positional difference maker, as you mentioned.
All right. I mentioned I was taking quarterback in round 3. I preferred Lamar Jackson to Josh Allen because of the playoff schedule. That turned out to be an absolute disaster because if you take quarterback in round 3, you better hit and he better separate from the other quarterbacks. And Lamar did not, which honestly was shocking to me. I just didn't think he could fail given the way he scores fantasy points, rushing, TD throw rate, Todd Monken at the controls. Now, I get that he was hurt. You know, he played 13 games, but he played in a lot of games where injuries clearly bothered him. But man, like he was playing in these games where like I had to start him because he was starting and he just wasn't himself. 302 rushing yards in 13 games. So yeah, maybe we could chalk this one up to injury. The big process takeaway I want to have from this is I was taking Lamar Jackson over Josh Allen every time because of one thing, playoff schedule, which is like not that important anyways. I should have at least been mixing and matching and getting some Josh Allen in there, and that would have made a big, big difference for my portfolio. So yeah, Evan, any thoughts on the elite quarterback stuff and Lamar's season?
I actually haven't looked back at my quarterback rankings, but I'm pretty sure I had Lamar over Josh Allen as well. I think I had him 1-2. And I was there right there with you. So I felt the pain. I don't, it was a fall off. I think that what we're going to have to determine is, has Lamar Jackson actually lost juice, or was just an injury plagued season from which he can bounce back? That will be one of the biggest topics, I think, of the entire offseason, especially as they change coaching staffs.
Yeah, I mean, that's a concern for me too. You know, I think he'll come back and be healthy, but losing Todd Monken is something we're going to have to talk about for sure on all Ravens stuff. All right. Number 8, biggest hit of the season goes to Silva from Round by Round podcast, episode 899. Got to Silva there. I think it was round 3 or round 4. And he said his favorite pick was Jackson Smith in Jigba. We've talked about this one on Man vs. Machine, but my takeaway is just coaching matters. You know, JSN had Shane Fraudrin in 2023. He had Ryan Grubb in 2024. In 2025, he gets Clint Kubiak, and that makes a massive difference. Obviously, Darnold as well improved the quarterback play, but I thought Kubiak going there just made a big difference. They no longer used him as this screen merchant, really low ADOT merchant. They expanded his route tree. And again, like coaching matters so much in the NFL. And I thought that was a huge thing for JSN. Evan, go ahead and take your lap on the JSN call from the Perfect Draft Pod.
Well, again, it's kind of similar to Brian Thomas, who failed. Okay, but when a dude is like an extreme producer in college, and JSN, because he played with 4 other All-Pro receivers at Ohio State and had injuries, his production was not to the level of Brian Thomas, but his production was to the level of Brian Thomas in that he was a first-round pick in the NFL draft. He's coming off a 100-catch season. He's entering his age 23 season in 2025. These are the kind of guys that I want to bet on over and over and over and over again, and want to rank higher than their ADP to make sure that the subscribers and the people that look at the top 150 get these guys on their rosters. And this one was a smashing hit, even to a greater extent than I expected, because there were at least some concerns entering the season about Sam Darnold, and people were talking about Jalen Milroe. You know what I mean? Like, and that gets to you a little bit, but every time in the 3rd round, this was a smash the button pick for me, and I think for anybody that was using the top 150.
Yeah, it's easy now to look back and be like, oh yeah, of course. At the time, nobody had confidence in Sam Darnold. In fact, the narrative was Seattle's just going to try to hide Sam Darnold and run the ball in every play and play defense. And that wouldn't have been great for JSN, and they did play
They actually kind of did that a little bit, though. It's just all the volume that JSN commanded.
Yeah.
I mean, what an absolute machine and a player that he is.
Yeah. And like, no one can project a 34% target share for a season, right? Like, we're not going to get anyone over like 27, 28% we're not going to project him for that over the course of the season. To go out and get 34% of the targets is just shows the talent and just, total freak.
Yeah.
Total freak.
And his yards per route run at the end of the season. I mean, I actually I haven't looked at his end of the season yards per route run, but I know that it was consistently above 4 for the vast majority of the season. I would love if somebody could go back and look at the heyday of Jerry Rice and compare JSN to the heyday of Jerry Rice, if they even can do that, nowadays. But I mean, I kind of think that it would be on par with the best years of Jerry Rice, JSN in 2025.
No doubt. Oh, you could go back and watch every Jerry Rice game and count how many routes he ran if you really wanted to.
Could you even find every Jerry Rice game? I mean, I don't know. NFL Films probably has it.
All right, number 9 on the list is a miss from my perfect draft article, and that was Xavier Worthy. So on Xavier Worthy, like the literal first game of the season, Friday night game, this buffoon Travis Kelce runs into Xavier Worthy and messes up Worthy's shoulder. And I thought that really derailed his season because that was the time when Rashee Rice was suspended. That was supposed to be Xavier Worthy's time to establish himself as the alpha. But whatever, he was hurt. And when he came back, I mean, he was still horrible. He was a horrible pick. And the takeaway for me is going back to what I said at the top about this macro stuff. This kind of player, 5'11", 165, best attribute is speed. In today's NFL, it's just not that valuable. Everyone is playing too high safety. It mutes what Xavier Worthy does well. Patrick Mahomes is throwing deep far less, as what most QBs are throwing deep far less. And his success rate when he does throw deep continues to go down, I think in part because the way defenses are playing now. And so the takeaway for me is that this type of player is so tempting. The guys who are small and fast and it's so tempting. I'm just not sure it's a fit for the way defenses are playing in today's NFL. So it was a huge miss, but I hopefully have like a good takeaway here going forward. Evan, any thoughts on that and Xavier Worthy?
Yeah, who's fallen victim to that temptation more than anyone is Andy Reid.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, he's been trying to find the next Deshaun Jackson for a decade plus, whether it be DeAnthony Thomas or McCall Hardman or Xavier Worthy, or, I mean, the list goes on. And that guy doesn't, Deshaun Jackson is kind of a unicorn. Maybe Will Fuller had a chance to be that, as we've talked about.
Tank Dell.
What?
Tank Dell,
maybe. But yeah, I mean, it's first of all, it's really hard to find guys that win like that. And certainly, as you mentioned, in today's NFL, where defenses are geared up to stop big plays, every coach, whether he's offensive coach or defensive, explosive. We got to stop. We got to get the explosives. We got to stop the explosives. And Xavier Worthy is a guy that the defenses are truly built to stop in today's NFL.
Yeah, I mean, the splits for Xavier Worthy when Rashee Rice is on the field are just horrific. I mean, he just like no production whatsoever when he's out there. With Rashee Rice, I'm sure people are still going to talk themselves into Xavier Worthy next year. They'll all be very curious where his ADP settles. Let's go to number 10 on the list. One of the biggest hits, I think, for both of us, but definitely for me this season was George Pickens. Just the easiest layup ever. I mean, Pickens was my most drafted player. I know Evan was on him also. Basically, every sharp person I know was on George Pickens. It's just a reminder of how much situation matters. Pickens goes from Pittsburgh, quarterback issues, defensive-minded team, weather issues. He goes from that to Dallas, which has Dak Prescott, terrible defense. They get into shootouts. They play in a dome. Like, you could not have drawn up a more different offensive environment. And so if you believed in George Pickens' talent, as I think most of us do, just a no-brainer in round 5, round 4, wherever he was going, round 6, to just smash George Pickens. And yeah, I mean, him, Achane, Chase Brown, JSN, like these were like the guys that you actually needed and moved the needle this year. So feel really good about the George Pickens hit. Anything else on that, Evan?
We were in lockstep on George Pickens. Yeah. So feel great about that pick for sure.
All right. Number 11 is a fade that turned out to be a hit. It was Marvin Harrison for me as a fade. Really worked out. Had literally 0 of Marvin Harrison this year. I probably got lucky that he was hurt when Jacoby Brissett was really going nuts. But still, like to me, it is a reminder of the changing landscape, not in the NFL this time, but the changing landscape in fantasy football. Like Marvin Harrison was objectively bad as a rookie. And then there was no scheme change. There was no quarterback change. Trey McBride didn't leave. And yet Marvin Harrison was still going in the third round in best ball. And like people want to bet these days in fantasy football, people want to bet on young no matter what. Whereas 5 or 10 years ago, people would give up on young players faster. So I want to be mindful of that going forward, like overpaying for super young guys. I get it, but I think the price on some of these guys has adjusted. And this is, by the way, very different from Brian Thomas or Ladd McConkey. Brian Thomas and Ladd McConkey were incredible as rookies. Marvin Harrison, I thought, was bad as a rookie. So to me, it's like two different profiles there. But yeah, Evan, I know you disagreed a little bit. Any thoughts on the Marvin Harrison run out this season?
Well, Marvin Harrison's like advanced metrics as a rookie were not very good. He did have almost 900 yards and 8 touchdowns as a rookie, though. So if you're just going from accounting stats, you're plugging it into Pro Football Reference, search historically, dude's a top 10 pick in the draft. He has almost 900 yards and 8 touchdowns as a rookie. Like Marvin Harrison's going to pop up with some dudes that have, are Hall of Famers. But you're right. Like his success rate, that kind of stuff was not overly, impressive at all as a rookie. I think it got to a point where it's mental with him in year 2. I wasn't like, I talked about him on Man versus Machine as it pertained to Trey McBride, but I wasn't like super high on Marvin Harrison Jr. I wasn't drafting him a lot. I certainly was higher on him than you were. I don't even think that if you had done a top 150, I don't even think he would have been on it, honestly, Adam Levitan. But I think it's like, I think it got mental in year 2 for him. I don't know where we're going with Marvin Harrison Jr.'s career from here on out.
Yeah, I mean, the guys are starting to work on, and we're all starting to work on actual underlying projections for next season already. And it's really hard because what do you do with Michael Wilson? It's really, really hard because you're going to have Michael Wilson, Trey McBride,
new offense.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting. The only thing I'd say that I think is unique.
No idea who's going to be playing running back.
Yeah. The only thing that I would say that I think is unique to Marvin Harrison, and you're going to think that I'm an idiot and crazy. I honestly think if his dad was not Marvin Harrison, that people would not have taken him in round 3. I honestly believe that. He would have been like a round 5 pick if his name was not Marvin Harrison Jr.
And you also think that the reason that the Cardinals took him at 4th overall and that he was the number 1 wide receiver recruit in the nation and that he was Brian Hartline's best pupil of all time was because of his father.
Yes, he's a Nepo baby. All right. We're moving on. Last one here was a miss for me. It was Travion Henderson. Now, I was not really taking Travion where he was going in high stakes stuff and best ball, where he was got as high as round 3, early round 4. But in home leagues, I did like Travion Henderson as a round 5 pick or so, which is where he was going in more home league stuff. And even in round 5, it was a disaster. Now, people will try to tell you it wasn't a disaster because Travion had some huge moments. He had some huge games, particularly when Ramondre was briefly banged up. But the truth is, if I spend a round 5 pick on a guy, I expect early season production. And so maybe the takeaway on Travion for me is that the rookie skill player stuff under certain coaches matters. Like McDaniels and Vrabel, perhaps they're in that camp where they don't want to just be like, hey, we took Travion in round 2. We're going to put him out there ahead of the veteran. So I don't know, man. I've talked a ton on the solo pod. I did like an entire solo pod about Travion if you guys want to listen back to that. But yeah, Evan, any thoughts on Travion this season? Definitely was a miss for me there in the middle rounds.
He scored 10 touchdowns. He averaged over 5 yards per carry. He went well over 1,100 yards from scrimmage. He was very up and down. Like he had 3 game spurts where it's like, oh my God, to me, the biggest takeaway regarding Travion Henderson was that we and maybe the entire community underestimated how good Ramondre Stevenson actually is, number one. And number 2, to add onto your point, that, a coaching staff like Mike Vrabel's and Josh McDaniels might hold a player of Ramondre Stevenson who is often discarded by the fantasy football community, especially when you throw in a top 40 pick like Travion Henderson. They are going to hold Rondé Stevenson in higher regard. That would be my biggest takeaway regarding Travion Henderson, who I think, for all intents and purposes, did have a plenty promising rookie season. He certainly showed that he has massive big playability. He catch the football, and he can get into the end zone.
Yeah. One thing that surprised me, like Ramondre had some fumble issues early, and I thought that would be like the last straw for Vrabel.
Yeah.
It wasn't. They stuck with Ramondre through those fumbles.
And then he didn't fumble after week 5 at all.
Right. But yeah, the coaching stuff is definitely a great point. And we're going to get to Colson Loveland in the next episode. But like one thing that on Travion, Colson Loveland, Luther Burden, like just because a guy gets taken high does not always mean he's going to play a ton year one. And, you know, like usually they do, but not always. And we saw Ben Johnson like go out of his way not to play Burden and Loveland, and the Patriots go out of their way not to play Travion for most of the season. So yeah, just one more takeaway for me there. Let's get into it here with later round hits and misses. We will start with a big miss from me, and that was Calvin Ridley. I mean, he was just terrible, terrible, terrible. And then he got hurt. Even if Calvin Ridley didn't get hurt, though, I suspect this one was a big miss. I think the biggest takeaway for me is if your thesis for a play is, well, the situation can't be any worse than it was last year, or it can't get any worse, that's just not the best argument, you know? Like, and I was excited for Cam Ward, but I still knew the situation around him was so dire. And then on top of that, Calvin Ridley, 30 years old, hadn't seen him be a difference-making player since like 2020 in Atlanta. So the case for Calvin Ridley wasn't really great looking back on it, other than I think the Titans and Cam Ward are going to be a lot better. And I was just wrong on that. And that sunk Calvin Ridley. Evan, any thoughts on what happened to Ridley and the Titans this year?
I mean, I also got sunk on this with Tony Pollard, who had a miserable regular season and went freaking ballistic in the playoffs out of nowhere. But I mean, I fell victim to this too. I mean, you had Will Levis out the door. You had year 2 of Brian Callahan. You had year 2 of Bill Callahan. You had an improved offensive line on paper. You had the number 1 pick in the draft. You know, I understand being optimistic about and trying to get value. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get value from players like Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard, who we project to have better environments around them. The environment really wasn't better around them almost whatsoever, to the extent that Brian Callahan literally got fired.
Yeah.
So projecting, you know, internal improvement can be dicey, and it backfired. And sometimes it can be great.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
we're going to talk about
the majority of the times it can be great when you get it right, but we didn't get it right this time.
Right. And like, we're going to talk about Chris Olave in a minute here. And it's another one where I was like, the environment has to be better. And it was, you know, and Chris Olave turns out to be a huge hit. So this was just, you know, getting wrong that the Titans could be better. But also, Chris Olave is like a better player than Calvin Ridley, younger than Calvin Ridley. So it's not exactly the same. All right. Player 2 on later round hits and misses is a hit from Silva's Shy Away article. Silva was on a big DJ Moore fade. It's crazy, man. DJ Moore played all 17 games. He led the Bears in routes by a mile. The Bears won 11 games, and DJ Moore was still unusable. I mean, that's hard to do, man. Like, the way it ran out for DJ Moore was really, really hard. So, Evan, thoughts on getting the DJ Moore fade right this season?
You know, I would say that this is one of the ones where I got it right in the end, even though my process was not, it was far from impeccable, because I was kind of building off of DJ Moore and Caleb Williams had not shown a lot of chemistry in their first year together. And I thought that Rome Odunze and Caleb Williams would, and that was absolutely not the case. Rome Odunze he had a miserable season, at least from a chemistry standpoint with his quarterback. Caleb Williams' chemistry with DJ Moore was actually decent. It's just that DJ Moore's role in the offense was so scaled back by Ben Johnson that DJ Moore really wound up not helping you in fantasy, even though he had an all right season from the standpoint that, from his own playing standpoint.
I was on a DJ Moore fade also, not as severe as Evan was, but also just for a different reason, really, which was regime change speaks. It's not about what the team says publicly, it's about what they do. Ben Johnson comes in, spends the 10th overall pick on Colson Loveland, and spends an early round 2 pick on Luther Burden, even though they already had just paid Cole Kmet and had already just paid DJ Moore, and they had Roma Dunze there anyways, and they still went out and made those picks. To me, that was kind of like an indictment on DJ Moore. And so it's a reminder that the offseason stuff matters. Like the personnel news matters.
It was. And I think that DJ Moore, despite having a fine season, he made some really big plays for the Bears this past year. I think that he is going to be off the roster by the time training camp starts.
Yes. Free Truther Burden. Okay. Number 3 is one I already alluded to. Massive hit for us across the board. I think all of us at ETR were on this one. It was Chris Olave. Similar to George Pickens, where it seemed like almost all sharp people were on Olave, and he delivered massively, like round 6 or so ADP, finishes as fantasy's wide receiver 6. And again, the takeaway for me on Olave is coaching matters. If you read Thorman's stuff preseason, we knew Kellen Moore would try to play extremely fast. We knew Kellen Moore is willing to be throw heavy, and we know that he's a pretty good schemer and can scheme guys open. So all that was good for Chris Olave. If he could just stay healthy, which, if you listen to the Christian McCaffrey segment, I think people are very overconfident in their perceived ability to predict injuries. Chris Olave stays healthy, avoids the concussions, and just an absolute smash in a season where wide receiver was down big time. So huge hit here, Evan, on the level of the George Pickens hit and the JSN pick. I mean, these were the wide receivers that you needed. Any thoughts on Olave, Evan?
Coaching matters. Positive injury regression can really come in handy, especially when you're getting a guy at a clear discount. No one wanted to draft Chris Olave. And talent matters. Chris Olave, through all the nicks and concussions and everything, he's always had really high yards per route run. Was a very high, I think it was the 12th pick in the draft. So this one, in hindsight, it feels like it was an easy one.
Yeah. Similar to the Pickens one, really, really easy one there. And also, I think, like Evan mentioned, injury regression, the kind of injury matters. If you have a lingering ankle or you have a history of a bunch of different knee issues, to me, that's different than, oh, you randomly broke your leg and you're fine, or you had a concussion or a series of concussions and now you're totally cleared, so I think there's some nuance there inside the injury risk stuff also. All right. Let's go to number 4, which was a miss for me, Justin Fields. I subscribe to the theory that if a quarterback is capable of running for 100 yards in a game, I need to take him if he's available in round 9 or round 10. And I know Justin Fields sucks and the Jets suck. My thought was just, he can run for 100 yards in a game and he's going in round 9 or round 10. I'm going to close my eyes and take him. It's just such an unfair cheat code at the quarterback position. And honestly, I know people want to hear like why Justin Fields was such a terrible pick. I kind of still think that it was right. Just in this specific case, the organization is so broken that it just turned out to be wrong. And I guess the one thing I'd say, Evan, is I underestimated the chances that Fields would get benched. Like, I didn't think no matter how bad he was, they would just give up and go to Tyrod Taylor or whatever else. So that was a mistake, but just I'm still not sure it was a mistake to take this archetype of quarterback here in round 10. Evan, any thoughts on Justin Fields' takeaways from his disastrous season?
Yeah, it's incredible how far we've gone with Justin Fields. Like that, the perception is how bad he is. He actually didn't play that poorly the year before in Pittsburgh. He had some, like, at least borderline, to the extent that there were a lot of people in Chicago that thought that the Bears should trade the Caleb Williams pick and sign Justin Fields. I mean, that was actually like a real sentiment. It was probably like 50-50 in Chicago, maybe even more. He has an 1,000-yard rushing season on his resume. That is massive in fantasy. And I was with you. I didn't think that they would go to Tyrod Taylor, but it got that bad. The Jets are just an absolute. You see, Aaron Glenn has fired almost every coach on his staff. It's unbelievable. I mean, I don't even think that he deserved to have another year. All the stuff that he went through with the media,
Yeah.
they got worse over the course of the season. This was a sinking ship from the get go. That's where I think that I missed, that I just should have almost full fade on anything having to do with the Jets. In hindsight, that's what I wish that I would have done. Um, but I mean, I felt good about my Justin Fields process at that time. I was high on him. I drafted him a lot in best ball, but the Jets are just an absolute mess. I mean, they've got to be the most dysfunctional organization in the NFL, and there are plenty of dysfunctional organization in the NFL. I think that they take the cake.
For sure. I also, looking back, I had like a full fade on Garrett Wilson. I did not take Garrett Wilson at all. And if I wanted to full fade Garrett Wilson and still take Justin Fields, what I was basically saying was he's just going to run in garbage time and I'm going to get there by him running for 100 yards. Kind of a thin path, but still, I don't want what happened here with Fields to stop me from taking swings on these kind of rushing quarterbacks. Like this is what we want in fantasy, later round quarterbacks that can run. I'll live with the results, I think, for the most part. And speaking of running quarterbacks, Evan, I'm very curious to see where Mr. Malik Willis lands, my boy. I cannot wait to see if he can get a starting job here this offseason. All right. Let's go to number 5, Tyler Warren. This was in my perfect draft. I had Tyler Warren as like my favorite pick in, I think, round 9 or round 10. I don't know if this is a hit or a miss because he came out looking very good. He was the focus of RPOs as Daniel Jones was running. Colts were smashing. But even when things were going good for Tyler Warren, he didn't really have any huge games. And then when Daniel Jones gets hurt, Tyler Warren just falls off the face of the earth. So I think and I want to do Colson Loveland with this also. And I would consider I was on Colson Loveland a lot. I would kind of consider that a miss also because he didn't really get going until week 17 or 18. Obviously, he was awesome from week 17 through into the playoffs. But yeah, they just didn't play him. So I would call Colson Loveland the miss for me and Tyler Warren like somewhere in the middle. I still think that these were the kind of swings I wanted to take at tight end, though. Evan, any thoughts on how it went for the rookie tight ends this year and any takeaways going forward?
I think your assessment of both was beautiful. I mean, I think that you spoke that very well. Tyler Warren had 76 catches as a rookie, over 800 yards as a rookie, only scored 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
It was, the case with the Colts was like when every dude was healthy, Downs, Pittman, Pierce, who had a breakout year. Pittman had a really nice year too. When Downs was in there, that he can play. He just only plays like half the time. And then Tyler Warren, and then the offense is built around Jonathan Taylor. It puts Tyler Warren in a position where he's not he didn't have a 100-yard game.
Right.
He did have one 99-yard game. Yeah, he had an 8 for 99. But it's just hard to have truly big games in that scenario with all those guys healthy. With Colson Loveland, I mean, the dude is unbelievable. It just took him a minute because of the presence of Cole Kmet, because he's a rookie, because he dealt with a little bit of injury stuff early on. But then obviously when he hit massively. He's like already a top 3 tight end in the league, not just as a receiver, but also as a blocker.
Yeah. From a macro perspective, if I'm taking tight end in this range, and I think more likely I want a barbell approach at tight end, either go elite or go super late. Like these guys that are typically go in this range, their ceiling is kind of capped. We know what they are. The ones that have broken out in this range have been unknowns. Sam Laporta in this range where these guys went was a huge hit as a rookie. And so I think it's worth swinging on these unknowns in this range more than it is on guys like Njoku or, even Goddard, who I know had a really nice season based on touchdowns, who I liked. But yeah, like this range of tight end is one to be careful about it, and you want to swing for upside. And if they gave Colson Loveland a chance early on, like he would have been one of the best picks in fantasy. He just did not get on the field enough early. Let's go to number 7 on Silva's shy away list. He had Baker Mayfield, and so the fade Baker was a nice big hit for Silva. Also, shout out to the ETR ranks. We had a huge fade on Baker as well. To me, it's like the touchdown rate stuff, and I know we talk about this all the time, Evan. When guys' touchdown rates get out of control, they typically regress the next year, and that's at least one of the things that happened to Baker this year. Thoughts on the Baker fade hitting this year?
Yeah, it was like the inverse of Trevor Lawrence, like the exact inverse of Trevor Lawrence, who I was super high on. Um, Baker Mayfield also, I mean, there were a lot of reasons to not be in on him, and his ADP was like really
Yeah.
high. And I mean, I get it. He's kind of like a fun player. He's coming off a great season, but Mike Evans was a year older, and Chris Godwin was coming off a horrible injury. Where the more that you looked into that injury, the more you're like, man, I don't know about this. And Godwin just never really popped during the season. He also was a year older. I mean, he's not young at this point either. And then obviously the loss of Liam Cohen, who had encouraged Baker Mayfield to become like a very productive rusher, helped spike that touchdown rate for Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, as we mentioned, highest yards per route run of their careers in the previous season under Liam Cohen. He's gone. Didn't know what to think of Josh Grizzard, who no longer coaches for the Buccaneers at this point. So actually, I think in hindsight, this is another easy one, fading Baker Mayfield. And it's also the nature of the quarterback position. You don't want to get too high on one of these guys that is, a mid to late round sort of player. I mean, there are just so freaking many of them. I mean, even with Trevor Lawrence, I was high on him, but I had him in a tier with like 12 other quarterbacks. I just had him at the very top of the tier as the quarterback 10 overall. But I mean, he was in a tier with like 12 other guys. You never want to get too high on any one of those particular guys. They're very interchangeable at a onesie position.
So the big takeaway for me, then I've talked about this like every offseason. Hopefully you guys have heard this. Pocket passers are so dependent on their touchdowns, and that is very hard to project, which is why you see things like Baker and CJ Stroud. In other words, Baker's career touchdown rate, i.e., what percent of his throws turn into touchdowns, is 5.0%. In 2024, with Liam Cohen, Baker got up to 7.2% touchdown rate. And then in 2025, of course, that's going to fall back towards his career rate, 4.8%. And he fails. So, and we saw the same thing with Stroud. Like, we had this huge fade on Stroud in year 2, and people are like, what are you guys talking about? Stroud's incredible. He's going to smash again. And CJ Stroud's touchdown rate just went from outlier to normal, and he was a huge bust at his ADP. So just be very, very careful with pocket passers who have these outlier touchdown rates year over year. Very, very important at the quarterback position. All right. Let's go to number 8, which was a big hit for both of us, I think, at the quarterback position, Dak Prescott. I don't know why people weren't on Dak. I mean, he was coming off an injury. He only played 8 games in 2024. All the same reasons that we were on George Pickens, to me, is the same reasons that we were on Dak. I was just confused throughout the whole process why no one wanted Dak. So I don't really have a lot of takeaways here other than the market isn't always right. Evan, what do you think of Dak's season?
No, it's huge on Dak, Pickens, Lamb, the next guy that we'll talk about. But Dak, like, this was an easy one. Yeah, I mean, ship it.
Yeah. All right. I want to do Jaden Blue next to stick with the Cowboys stuff because both of us were on Jaden Blue as one of our favorite flyers. Now, this did not hurt that much in season long because in season long, whatever, just drop him. It's not a big deal. You use the 10th round, 11th round pick on him, just drop him. In best ball, Jaden Blue hurt a lot because we could not drop him and we were taking zeros. I mean, stone cold zeros all year. So I would still consider this a pretty big miss for me personally. I don't know, man. I think the biggest regret for me, if there is one, is that Javonte Williams, similar to Ramondre Stevenson, I thought he would be a zero, and he just wasn't. And these veteran backs, maybe that's the way it goes sometimes. So yeah, Evan, any thoughts on the Jaden Blue, Javonte Williams, Cowboys stuff that we both certainly messed up this year?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even give Javonte Williams a shot with how bad he had looked the previous couple seasons in Denver. And that was the miss here. I think that the trickle down effect of that, not getting a dude who was, I don't want to say for free. Nobody's for free in a fantasy draft, but getting a dude that you could get in the 9th round to be like a legit borderline fringe RB1 with a lot of RB1 weeks over the course of the season. I mean, I really screwed that up. I just totally wrote off Javonte Williams.
Yeah.
And that led me to Jaden Blue, who I think absolutely is an NFL caliber talent, but there's a reason that a dude that, was super, super explosive in the Big Ten and scored a million touches on very few, scored a million touchdowns on very few touches. You know, why he wasn't a workhorse in college and why he went in the 5th round of the draft. So I mean, I knew all along that Jaden Blue could be like a big time zero, but I also thought that he could be a big time hit because I had totally written off Javonte Williams. So to me, the miss here is Javonte Williams. I totally blew that.
There were some reports out of camp that weren't great on Jaden Blue, like he's lazy.
And he showed up with the Louis Vuitton shoes and got blisters on his feet.
Louis Vuitton cleats and everything. So maybe I should have given that stuff more credence. It's I think one of the best things we do is separate noise from signal during training camp, off-season workouts, etc. Doesn't mean we're going to get perfect on everyone. I kind of thought that stuff was noise, that like he was going to be fine. This is like a media story, but maybe it turned out to be true. Maybe he was like pissing off the coaches, behind the scenes.
Well, they gave him a chance early in the season, and then straight up shut him down until I believe week 18. And then in week 18 against the Giants, like he showed something.
Oh, yeah.
He showed explosive ability, but there was a reason that they shut him down from like week 8 or week 10 or whatever it was, all the way till week 18. I mean, I think he definitely pissed off the coaches.
All right. Similarly, number 10 on our list here is Bashal Tutin, kind of a similar profile to Jaden Blue. This was another miss for both Evan and I. Even in hindsight, I kind of think Bashal Tutin was a good swing. I mean, one of the thesis of this was that they didn't really like Tank Bigsby. And they did. They traded Tank Bigsby. And at that point, I was like, oh my God, this Bashal Tutin thing's actually going to happen. And kind of later in the year, they used him as their goal line back ahead of Travis Etienne. And they used Bashal Tutin in the playoffs a bunch. So the results weren't there for Bashal Tutin, perhaps because similar to Javonte Williams, Ramondre Stevenson, we did not give Travis Etienne enough credit. But yeah, I felt like it was a good swing on Tutin, just didn't hit. What do you think of the way it ran out for Jacksonville running backs?
Yeah, I mean, especially at his cost, which was what, a 9th or 10th rounder, an exciting 9th or 10th rounder. Even Aaron Judge sometimes gets up to the plate and takes a heck of a rip and he lines it right to the left fielder. Even sometimes that happens. So I think that's what happens here. The good process, not the best result.
Yeah, do you think Travis Etienne, like in my head, I wasn't zeroing Travis Etienne. I was taking Travis Etienne. It wasn't like Javonte Williams or Ramondre Stevenson, but I think the fantasy community has something like they don't like Travis Etienne. It feels like that to me. Every year, people are finding reasons.
I think he's very polarizing.
Yeah.
I think that some people love him.
Yeah.
And I think that some people are like, no, because I don't know, some of his advanced metrics can be kind of dicey. He's a little boom busty. He's not great in scoring position. The Jaguars acknowledge that by using Bashal Tutin in scoring position quite a bit. There were games where they used 3 running backs. Like Quinn Allen didn't get a ton of touches, but he'd be on the field as a sort of like a poor man's Samaje Perine. Yeah. I understand it, but I wasn't out on Travis Etienne either. I was in on this offense. Obviously, that really hurt with Brian Thomas.
Right. All right. Let's go to number 11. This was a hit from Silva. Silva was shy away from Caleb Johnson, take Jaylen Warren. The takeaway for me on this one is just following preseason news. If you followed preseason at all, you saw Caleb Johnson was in big trouble. I mean, he was way behind, could not get any reps with the starters. They were like reporters in Pittsburgh and coaches even were saying not the greatest things about Caleb Johnson. So anybody who says like camp news doesn't matter, it does if you know how to read it. And I thought Caleb Johnson was a big example of that. Evan, any more thoughts on Caleb and Jaylen Warren this year?
My theory was that, well, first of all, we had Renner on in the offseason. He's God's gift to draft analysis. And he was really low on Caleb Johnson, like really low on Caleb Johnson. So that was my first indication. My second one was just my theory that I came up with in my head, that I just don't think that Aaron Rodgers is going to want Caleb Johnson back there with him very much, unless he does something special, especially when you have the option of Jaylen Warren, a really trusty vet who can break tackles, play in the passing game. Then, of course, Kenneth Gainwell came along, who, no one was talking about at any point, really until late in the season. And as soon as Kenneth Gainwell emerged, like Caleb Johnson was not playing whatsoever. So I don't know. Where do you stand on Caleb Johnson's forward-looking outlook?
I mean, not only was Renner low on Caleb Johnson, but the NFL was low on him. He's lasted till 83rd overall in the draft, end of the third round. A ton of running backs went ahead of Caleb Johnson. So I don't think Renner's the only one. I think the NFL didn't think that much of Caleb Johnson either. And obviously Pittsburgh thought he was total dust. So yeah, not great. Not great.
Yeah, not great. And if you look at it again, do a Pro Football Reference search on a running back that gets what did he? How many touches did he even
28
have?
carries for 69 yards as a rookie.
Yeah, I can barely even remember any of his carries.
Yeah,
I mean, just that a running back who is drafted in the third round that gets that little amount of work in his rookie season, those guys are out of the league by the end of their rookie contract.
for sure. The only thing I'd say is that he did have Art Smith this year, and Art Smith is like not the best at identifying which of his players should be getting the football, right? So I don't want to bury Caleb yet. We'll see what the new staff in Pittsburgh thinks of him, but yeah, certainly not great.
What is Art Smith doing these days? Is he out just kind of like hovering for a job?
No, he's the offensive coordinator for Ohio State.
Oh my God, that's right. Oh my God, replacing Brian Hartline.
I know, our boy.
All of our heroes are coming together.
It's great for Penn State, man, because shout out Penn State. This is like the best thing that's happened in Penn State in like 20 years. Art Smith becoming the offensive coordinator for the
and Penn State does need some help.
For the Buckeyes. Okay. Couple more quick ones here. Number 12 on the list was a miss for me. Jordan Addison was in my perfect draft. I think like all the Viking stuff goes back to me just thinking and saying Kevin O'Connell is so good. It doesn't matter. He can do it with anyone. And so even if I thought that JJ McCarthy would suck, which I didn't. I thought JJ McCarthy would be fine or reasonable. I didn't think he'd be like the worst to ever play the quarterback position. But regardless, I was just probably giving too much credit to Kevin O'Connell's scheme and at the same time not giving Sam Darnold enough credit for how well he had the Vikings playing last year. So if I just throw my hands up and say, doesn't matter. I don't want to look at anything else. Kevin O'Connell's the man. I'm taking Addison. I'm taking Jefferson. I'm taking McCarthy. Obviously, that turned out to be really, really bad in hindsight. Evan, any thoughts on Addison, Jefferson, or the Vikings stuff and the way it went down?
I think you summed it up well. With Jordan Addison, it was frustrating because we thought we could get that discount on him because of the weeks 1 through 3 suspension.
Yeah.
And that looked really good for a minute because in week 4, he went 4 for 114. In week 5, he went 5 for 41 with a touchdown. And then the game after that, he went 9 for 128. So it was like, oh, baby, we are cooking on Jordan Addison. We nailed that. And he didn't do anything for the rest of the season except for like get arrested a couple more times. Because Jordan Addison, like, he kind of like, I'm not his dad, okay? But like, he kind of needs to grow up a little bit.
Yeah.
He keeps like getting in trouble for really stupid things. I hope he does. Because I mean, I think he's a baller. Like, I believe in his talent, but bad situation, kind of a knucklehead, and hopefully it gets it together.
Yeah, and hopefully the quarterback situation, they figure something out there too. I don't know exactly how it's going to run out, but you have Justin Jefferson out there in the media saying not the best things about
that was
JJ McCarthy.
That was rough that he said that.
Yeah.
I mean, goodness. They fired their GM over this.
Yep. All right. Last one here on hits or misses for 2025 was a nice hit for Silva, Zach Charbonnet. Takeaway for me was more just on the regime change. When you have running backs going through a regime change, you don't know for sure which one they are going to prefer. I thought that it would still be Kenneth Walker, but there were a lot of games where Zach Charbonnet was actually ahead, and he was certainly the preferred back they used at the goal line. So nice hit there from Silva. We hit this one on man versus machine recap, but yeah, any more process thoughts on the Charbonnet call, Evan?
I just say, pass protection for running backs. It's not sexy. You don't get freaking fantasy points for, successful pass blocks, but coaches care about it. And so it shouldn't be at the forefront of your running back takes, at the forefront of your running back analysis, but it's definitely something that you should have in the back of your mind. And when they're telling you that Zach Charbonnet is the best, the coaching staff is telling you this dude is the best pass blocking running back in the NFL, he's going to get on the field because of that. And Zach Charbonnet did. And then he was able to add the scoring position stuff. And he wound up playing an awful lot. I mean, it was almost a 50-50 split with Kenneth Walker. And at times, Charbonnet was playing more than Kenneth Walker, despite the fact that we know that Kenneth Walker has more explosive ability with the ball in his hands.
100%. All right. That is going to do it for our biggest hits and misses recap of the 2025 fantasy football season. Feel like we had a really good season overall, Evan. Obviously some misses, but most importantly, we were on and ahead of market, I think, on the guys that you actually needed, like the actual needle movers. So feel really good about that. Hopefully you guys had a great fantasy season. Don't forget, NBA and golf are in full swing. We cover those sports with the same intensity we do cover NFL. Head to establishtheRun.com, find the golf tab, find the NBA tab for details on that. And for the true sickos out there, 2026 best ball product is up and running. For Evan, producer Luke, producer Ryan, for everyone behind the scenes at ETR, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.